London in 1666 was a very old city. It was a place of many people. Houses were packed close together. Most buildings were made of wood. The roofs were often made of thatch, which is dried straw. Narrow, winding streets twisted through the city like ribbons. This made it hard to move around quickly. The city had grown over many, many years. It was a busy port, full of ships and trade. People came from all over England and from other countries too to live and work in London. It was a city of great energy but also hidden dangers. The year before, in 1665, a terrible sickness had come. This was the Great Plague. Many thousands of people died. It was a sad and frightening time for everyone. London was still recovering from this awful event when the fire started. People were trying to get back to normal life. They hoped for better times ahead. The memory of the plague was still very fresh. The city was weaker because of it. Many homes were empty. The mood was one of caution, but life had to go on. The shops were open again. The markets were busy. The summer of 1666 had been very long. It was also very hot and dry. There had not been much rain for many weeks. This made everything very parched. The wooden houses became even drier than usual. The thatch on the roofs was like tinder. A small spark could easily start a big fire in these conditions. People used candles for light. They cooked on open fires. The risk of fire was always there. But in this dry summer, the risk was much, much higher than normal. The city was like a pile of dry wood, just waiting. London Bridge was special. It was covered with houses and shops. This was common in old cities. It was a very busy place. It was one of the few ways to cross the River Thames. The river was the heart of London. It brought goods and people. But the bridge, with its wooden buildings, was also a fire risk. If a fire started there, it could trap people. The city was full of churches. St. Paul's Cathedral was the biggest. It was a great stone building, but it had wooden scaffolding around it for repairs. This would prove to be a problem. The Great Fire of London started very early on a Sunday morning. The date was September 2nd, 1666. It began in a bakery. The bakery was on a street called Pudding Lane. This street was near London Bridge. The baker's name was Thomas Fariner. He was the king's baker. He made bread for the royal household. It is thought he forgot to put out his oven fire properly. The embers in the oven were still hot. They may have set fire to some nearby wood. This small start would soon become a huge disaster for the city. The fire began small, just in the bakery, but it did not stay small for long. The bakery was full of wood and flour. These things burn very easily. Soon the whole house was on fire. The Fariner family managed to escape. They climbed out of an upstairs window, but their maidservant was too afraid to jump. She became the first person to die in the fire. The flames quickly spread to the next house, then to the next. The houses in Pudding Lane were very close. They were made of wood. This helped the fire grow fast. A strong east wind was blowing that night. This wind was very important. It pushed the fire westwards. It fanned the flames, making them hotter and bigger. Sparks flew through the air. They landed on other wooden houses and thatched roofs. Soon more houses were burning. The fire jumped from street to street. People woke up to the smell of smoke and the sound of crackling flames. At first, many did not realize how serious it was. They thought it was just another small fire. London had many small fires. The Lord Mayor of London at the time was Sir Thomas Bloodworth. He was told about the fire, but he did not think it was very dangerous. He went to see it. He famously said, "Pish, a woman might piss it out." He did not order houses to be pulled down. Pulling down houses was a way to stop fires. It created a gap so the fire could not spread. Because he acted slowly, the fire got much worse. His mistake meant the fire had more time to grow. It became too big to stop easily. As the fire raged, chaos spread through London. People were terrified. They grabbed what belongings they could carry. They tried to escape the flames. The narrow streets were filled with people and carts. Everyone was trying to get away. Some people tried to save their goods by taking them to churches. They thought churches made of stone would be safe, but the fire was so hot it even burned many churches. The River Thames was full of boats. People used them to escape or to move their possessions to safety on the other side of the river. King Charles II played an important role. He was the king at that time. He and his brother James, Duke of York, took charge. They saw that the Lord Mayor was not doing enough. The king rode through the streets. He encouraged the firefighters. He even helped to fight the fire himself. He gave orders to pull down houses. This was to create fire breaks. These were gaps to stop the fire. James, Duke of York, also worked hard. He organized soldiers to help. They used gunpowder to blow up houses quickly to make bigger fire breaks. This was dangerous work. Firefighting in 1666 was very basic. There were no modern fire engines. People used leather buckets to carry water. They had small hand pumps called squirts. These were not very effective against such a huge fire. They also used long hooks to pull down burning houses. But the fire was too strong. The heat was intense. It melted the lead from the roof of St. Paul's Cathedral. The lead flowed like a river in the streets. The noise of the fire was deafening. It roared like a storm. People watched in horror as their city burned. The fire burned for 4 long days. It started on Sunday. It was finally brought under control on Wednesday, September 5th. But small fires continued for days after that. The wind dropped. The efforts to create fire breaks finally started to work. The fire reached a wide stone wall at Temple. It also reached an area near the Tower of London where many houses had already been pulled down. These things helped to stop it. But by then, a huge part of London was gone. The heart of the city was a ruin. It was a shocking sight. The immediate impact of the Great Fire was terrible. A vast area of London was destroyed. About 13,200 houses were burned down. 87 churches were gone. The famous St. Paul's Cathedral was a ruin. Many important buildings, like the Royal Exchange and the Guildhall, were also destroyed. Amazingly, not many people died in the fire itself. The official record says only a few, but many people lost everything they owned. They lost their homes, their businesses, and all their possessions. They became homeless overnight. Thousands of people camped in fields outside the city. The people of London suffered greatly. They needed food, water, and shelter. The king and the city officials tried to help. They set up camps. They brought in supplies. But it was a very difficult time. There was fear and confusion. Some people blamed foreigners for starting the fire. There were attacks on French and Dutch people. This was not true, but people were scared and angry. They needed someone to blame for the terrible disaster that had hit their lives. The city was covered in smoke and ash. The smell of burning stayed for a long time. After the fire, London had to be rebuilt. This was a huge task. King Charles II wanted to build a new modern city. He asked architects like Sir Christopher Wren to make plans. Wren had grand ideas for wide streets and beautiful squares, but many of these plans were too expensive. They also took too long. People wanted to rebuild their homes and businesses quickly, so many of the old street patterns remained. However, important changes were made. New laws said houses must be built of brick or stone, not wood. Streets were made a little wider. The Great Fire changed London forever. It was a terrible tragedy, but it also created an opportunity. The new city that rose from the ashes was safer. It was more resistant to fire. Christopher Wren designed many new churches. His most famous work was the new St. Paul's Cathedral. It became a symbol of London's rebirth. The fire also helped to get rid of some of the rats and fleas that carried the plague, so there were no more big plague outbreaks in London after the fire. The Great Fire of London is a very important event in history. It shows how a disaster can lead to big changes and improvements.